I don't tell this one much. When I do, I skip the beginning. Because the beginning isn't a ghost story, it's the worst 4 months of my life. And people want to get to the part with the basement. But I can't tell it right without the beginning, so bear with me. My son was born at 26 weeks. That's 14 weeks early. He weighed 1 pound 11 ounces. And he was in the NICU at the hospital in the city for 141 days. And I know that number the way you know your own birthday. My husband and I lived those months in a hallway. We'd drive an hour and 40 minutes down out of the mountains, sit in a room with an incubator, drive home, sleep 4 hours, do it again. I lost 20 pounds without noticing. There were weeks in there I have no memory of at all. So when they finally started talking about a discharge date, we were in no position to be picky about a house. We'd been staying with my husband's mother, and we needed our own place, and we needed it fast. And this one came up for $400 a month, which even 10 years ago in that county was low enough to make you ask a question. It was a big square farmhouse about 2 miles up a creek road, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch that had gone soft in one corner, built somewhere around 1900. The landlord lived 2 counties over and didn't want to be bothered, and told us we could do whatever we wanted to it as long as we paid on the first. And we had to do a lot to it, because a preemie coming home on oxygen can't be in a house with dust and mold, and God knows what in the air. We had about 6 weeks. We stripped wallpaper down to the plaster in every room. We scraped the popcorn ceiling. We had it tested first. It was clean, thank God. We painted everything twice. My husband replaced the subfloor in the back bedroom. We ripped out carpet that had been down since the Carter administration and had it hauled off. We worked ourselves stupid. And I'll tell you the truth, it was good for us. After 4 months of sitting in a plastic chair, unable to do a single thing for my own child, I could not have asked for a better gift than a house that needed everything. We never touched the basement. You got to it from a door in the kitchen, down a set of wooden steps with no rail, into a low space with a poured floor and stone walls, and a single bulb on a pull string. It was unfinished, and it was going to stay that way. We had 4 bedrooms upstairs. We didn't need it, and there wasn't time. The family before us had teenagers in it. That's what the neighbor across the creek told us later. And you could tell without being told, because they'd been down there, and they'd been down there a lot. Beer cans, a ruined couch, burn marks on the concrete, and spray paint over every wall. The usual stuff kids write, and then swastikas. Not 1 or 2, dozens of them in 3 or 4 different hands, some the size of your palm, and one on the far wall, taller than I am. I want to be plain about what I thought about that at the time, which was that it was disgusting and stupid, and that it was teenagers in a county with nothing to do being as ugly as they knew how to be. I did not think it meant anything. I still mostly don't, but I noticed my chest got tight looking at it. And I went back up those stairs, and in the entire year we lived in that house, I went down there exactly 1 time. That's the honest measure of it. I lived in a house for a year, and set foot in one of its rooms once, because it was bad down there. Not cold, not smelly, not anything you could point at. It was the feeling of being watched by something that was already angry at you before you came in. That's the best I can do. It wasn't, "Don't come in here." It was, "I know you're here." My husband went down more than I did. He had to. The water heater and the breaker box were both down there. And he never said much about it at first. He's not a man who talks about feelings, but he stopped taking his time. He'd go down and be back up in 90 seconds, and he'd shut that kitchen door behind him and put the little hook latch on it, and neither one of us ever discussed, why the kitchen door to the basement needed a hook latch, and every so often it came upstairs. That's the only way I know to say it. Everything would be normal for weeks, and then it would be in the house. Heavy. The air would go thick. You'd be in the kitchen and feel like somebody was standing in the doorway behind you, and you'd turn and there'd be nothing. The baby would be inconsolable in a way that wasn't his usual, and he had reflux and monitors and every reason in the world to fuss, so I'd write it off. But it was different. He'd scream facing the hallway. I'd give it a week. I'd tell myself I was exhausted, which I was, and that a woman running on 4 hours of sleep with a sick infant will feel any number of things, which is true. But after about a week of it, I'd get to where I couldn't stand to be in the house. So we had a system. I'd take the baby out and sit in the car at the end of the driveway with the heat running, and my husband would go through the house with sage. My mother-in-law's idea, and I'm not a superstitious person, and neither is she particularly, but you'll do anything. He'd do every room, and then he'd go down those stairs and do the basement. I never watched. I'd sit out there in the car with my son on my chest and watch the windows. He'd come out and get in the car, and his hands would be shaking, and he'd say it was heavy down there. That's the word he always used. Heavy. Angry, he said, and something else that took him about 6 months to admit to me, which was that in the smoke he'd see shapes come at him. Not float. Come at him, fast, like somebody rushing you, and go through him, and he'd keep going because he was too far into it to stop. He told me that one night at the kitchen table with his head down, and I didn't know what to say to him, so I didn't say anything, and it would work. That's the maddening part. For 2 or 3 weeks, the house would be a house again. There are 2 things from that year that I've never been able to put anywhere. The first one was in February. My son was home by then, 4 months old, sleeping in a bassinet beside our bed, because I could not make myself put him in another room. He was on an apnea monitor, a little sensor on his chest, with leads to a box that would shriek if his breathing stopped for 20 seconds. Anybody who's had a preemie knows that alarm. It gets into your bones. You hear it in the grocery store for years afterward. It went off at about 3 in the morning. I was up and across that room before I was awake, and my husband was up behind me, and I got my hands on my son, and he was fine. Warm, pink, breathing, sound asleep. I checked the leads, and the sensor was seated right, and the light on the box was green. It just went off once for about 4 seconds and stopped. That happens. False alarms happen constantly with those units. A lead comes loose. The baby shifts. I'd had a dozen of them, but when I looked up from the bassinet, my husband wasn't looking at me or at the baby. He was looking at the bedroom door, which was open, and past it into the hall, and he said in a completely flat voice, "It's back." And I felt it. I want to be careful here because I'm aware I just had a monitor go off and my heart was going, and adrenaline will make you feel anything. But the hall was heavy, the same heavy. And what I felt, standing there with my 4-month-old in my arms in the middle of the night, was that something had come partway up the stairs to see, and was standing in the hall, and was still there. We sat in the front room with every light in the house on until it got light out. We didn't sage it that night. We didn't do anything. We just sat. I've never been able to decide whether the monitor was a coincidence or not. And I've had 10 years. Coincidence is more likely. I know that. But my son was 3 feet from me, breathing perfectly well, and something told me to wake up. And when I woke up, the thing was in the hall. The second one is smaller, and it's the one that actually put us out of that house. It was spring, and I had the baby's room finally set up. The little bedroom at the top of the stairs, the one we'd redone first, with the wall we'd painted a pale green, and the mobile my sister sent. He was 6 or 7 months and doing well enough that I'd started letting him nap in there in the daytime with the monitor on. And I'd sit at the bottom of the stairs where I could hear. I went up one afternoon to get him, and the room was cold. Not drafty, cold like a walk-in. And on the wall above the crib, in the fresh paint, there was a mark. I don't want to oversell this. It was not carved and it was not drawn. It was a discoloration coming through the paint. That faint brownish ghosting you get when something bleeds through a coat, water stain or smoke or old ink. And it was maybe 8 inches across. And it was mostly straight lines. And there was a shape to it that I recognized from that basement. And I am not going to describe it any further than that. There is a completely ordinary explanation for this. We took down wallpaper in that room, and there'd been more than one layer. And God knows what was on the plaster underneath, and we primed it. But we did not seal it with anything special because we didn't know we needed to. Stains bleed through. That's a real thing that happens in old houses, and it happens all the time. But it had not been there in October when we painted it, and it had not been there in January, and it was there in April over my son's crib. And it was that shape. I took him out of that room, and he never slept in it again. We were gone by June. We got a place in town, newer, ugly, half again the rent, and I have never once regretted a dollar of it. I don't have an ending for you. I know how that's supposed to go. You find out somebody died in the house, and it clicks into place, and everybody at the table nods. I've looked. There's nothing. The family before us moved out to somewhere in Ohio. The place is 120 years old, so people have surely died in it. But I never found a death that meant anything, and I never found a story attached to that address. And I asked the woman across the creek twice, and she'd only say she'd never cared for the place and change the subject. What I keep coming back to isn't a ghost. It's the walls, because somebody's kids sat down in that basement, one after another, over some period of time, in enough different handwritings that it wasn't one kid on one bad night, and they covered that room with those marks. And I've never once been able to work out whether the thing in that house came from what they put on the walls. Whether they called something down into their own basement out of boredom and hate, or whether it was already down there and it got into a bunch of teenagers, and what I was looking at on those walls wasn't the cause at all. It was the symptom. My son is 10. He's fine. He's a completely ordinary 10-year-old. Who plays baseball badly and won't eat anything green, and he has no idea any of this ever happened, and he never will if I can help it. But I drove past that place last summer, going up the creek to see somebody, and it's empty again. Porch gone the rest of the way down, grass to the windowsills, and I slowed down the way you do, and what I thought, and I'm ashamed of it, and I thought it anyway, was good. I've had 10 years to find a hole in this, and I haven't found one. Not for lack of trying. I'm the skeptic in my family. I'm the one who explains the noises at Thanksgiving, the one who says carbon monoxide and hypnagogia, and the mind fills in gaps. And I have said all those things about this, and none of them cover it, and the person it happened to is 24 years old now, and still won't talk about it after dark. My sister moved into that complex in the fall of 2015 with my niece, who was 4. It was a little cluster of townhouse apartments on the flat ground, where a holler opens out onto the 2-lane, right at the edge of what passes for a town in that county. 12 units in 2 brick rows facing each other across a strip of grass with a swing set in the middle of it. Built in the early 80s by somebody who thought the mine was going to keep running. It's the kind of place people land when they need somewhere to land. Everybody's between things. Rent was $350 a month, and my sister was 26 and newly on her own. And it was what she could do, and she was proud of doing it. I helped them move in. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a little kitchen, a living room, a sliding door onto a concrete pad out back that looked at the ridge. It was fine. Honestly, it was fine. Clean, dry, freshly painted white, the way rentals are. My niece was thrilled, because she'd never had her own room before. They'd been at my mother's, and she picked the little one at the back, and my sister put up glow stars on the ceiling. And we all thought it was the beginning of something good. It was 3 or 4 days after that. My sister woke up around 2 in the morning to that little girl coming into her room at a dead run and screaming. Not crying, screaming. And she was saying, the man in my room, he's yelling at me. My sister was out of that bed and down the hall before she was fully awake. Turned on every light. Looked in the closet, under the bed, behind the door, in the bathroom, in the shower. Went downstairs and checked the front door, which was bolted and chained, and the sliding door, which had a broom handle in the track, because that's what you do. Windows all latched. Nothing out of place, not a thing. And my niece would not go back in that room. She slept in my sister's bed that night, and my sister lay awake till morning with her heart going. Now, a 4-year-old has a nightmare in a new house. That's nothing. That's the most ordinary thing in the world. New place, new sounds, the furnace kicking on, her whole life picked up and set down somewhere else. My sister told her it was a bad dream, and my niece said okay, and by the next afternoon, she was out on the swing set with the other kids. It happened again 4 nights later. Same thing. Screaming, running down the hall, the man in her room, he was yelling at her. And then twice more inside of 2 weeks. By the 3rd time, she'd stopped going into that room at all. Wouldn't go in for a toy. Wouldn't go in the daytime, with the light on and her mother standing right there. My sister tried everything. She slept in there with her. She left the light on. She left the door open. She left the door shut. She did the whole thing where you spray water around and call it monster spray, which had worked for about 100 other things. None of it did a thing. That child was sleeping in her mother's bed, and the little back bedroom sat empty with the glow stars on the ceiling. Here's what she was saying. And I want to be careful about this because it's the part that matters most. She never once said a monster. She never said a ghost or a shadow or anything a kid gets from cartoons. She said a man, a grown man. And she was consistent about 2 things across all 4 times, and my sister asked her about them separately, weeks apart, the way you do when you're trying to catch a kid in a story. He stood at the foot of her bed, and he was mad. That was her word every time. Mad. He was yelling at her, but she could never say what he was yelling. Not I couldn't hear him. She'd say she didn't know the words. She'd get frustrated trying to explain it, the way a 4-year-old does when she doesn't have the vocabulary for something and knows she doesn't. I asked her about it years later, when she was about 15 and old enough to talk about it as a memory. And she said the thing that I have never been able to get out from under. She said he wasn't yelling at her. She said he was yelling about something, and that he was looking at her while he did it, and that he seemed like he was trying to make her understand something and getting angrier that she didn't. She was 4. 4-year-olds do not make that distinction. 15-year-olds barely do. The way we found out was the ordinary way you find out anything in a small place, which is that somebody said it out loud without meaning to. My sister was at the swing set one afternoon in the spring, talking to another woman from the complex, one of the moms, somebody she'd gotten friendly with. And she mentioned, mostly as a joke on herself, that she was running on no sleep because her daughter wouldn't sleep in her own room, thought there was a man in it. And the woman's face changed. She said, "Which unit are you?" And my sister told her. And the woman said something like, "Well, that's creepy, considering." And then she told her about the man who'd overdosed in that apartment. It was 3 or 4 years before my sister moved in. He was in his 30s. He'd lived there with his kids for a while, and then something happened. A split, a custody thing. The woman wasn't clear, and it wasn't her business to be. And after that, he was there by himself. And he was found in that unit. And she said, and this is the piece that made my sister sit down on the edge of the swing set frame. The little back bedroom had been his son's room. My mother is the one who went looking. She's the family historian, the one with the shoebox of funeral cards, and she got on the computer that same week. It didn't take her long. Small county, and if you know the complex and roughly the year, the obituaries are all right there. She found him. Right name, right address, right time frame. 34 years old, survived by 2 children. The obituary had a photograph, the way they mostly do. The ones the family picks, where the man's a little younger than he was, in a collared shirt, in front of somebody's kitchen wallpaper. And here's what my mother did, and I want to say up front that all of us have gone back and forth on whether she should have. She had the picture up on the monitor, and she called my niece into the room. My niece was 5 by then. She came around the door frame at a trot, the way kids do when a grandmother calls them, and she got maybe half a step into that room, and she stopped, and she screamed. She turned around and went out of there, so fast she took a lamp cord with her, and she was screaming that it was him. It was the man. It's the man from my room, and she got behind my sister, and would not come out, and would not go back down that hallway for the rest of the day. Nobody had told her anything. That's the whole thing. That's what I've never gotten past. My mother didn't say, "I want to show you something." She didn't say a man's name. There was no context, no lead-in, no reason for a 5-year-old walking into a room to have any expectation at all about what was on a computer screen. My sister didn't know what was on the monitor. My mother had not shown that photo to a single soul before that moment. And I have run at this from every angle a skeptic runs at things, because that's what I do. Could she have seen a photograph of him somewhere before? In 400 square feet that had been painted and re-rented twice, my sister moved every stick of furniture in that place and never found so much as a pencil that wasn't hers. Could she have overheard the adults talking? Possible in theory. Kids hear everything. But the swing set conversation happened months into it, and the room thing started the first week. The talking came after. And it doesn't explain the photograph anyway. Hearing your mother say a name does not let you pick a man's face off a screen from 6 feet away in under a second. Could my mother have led her without meaning to? That's the strongest one, and I've pushed it hardest. But my mother is not a subtle woman, and there was no time for it. The child was in the room for half a step. Could she have been reacting to my mother's face, or to the tension in the room, and screamed because she was picking up that something was wrong? That one I can't rule out. That one keeps me honest. But it doesn't account for what she said, which was, "It's the man from my room," specific and immediate, before anybody had said a word. They were out of there inside of 2 months. My sister had already been looking. The sleep thing had ground her down to nothing, and she got into a place across the county line and never went back to that complex, not even to the playground. My niece stopped having them. That's the thing that always gets left out when this gets told at a table. It stopped when they moved. She slept in her own room in the new place from the first night, no trouble. and she's been fine ever since. And she's a normal young woman who works at a bank and has a boyfriend, and gives me a hard time about my truck, but she remembers it. All of it. She remembers the glow stars, and the shape of him at the foot of the bed, and the way he was mad. And she remembers walking into my mother's computer room. She told me once that she doesn't remember much else at all from being 4, but she has that. And she said something to me the last time it came up that I've been carrying around ever since. She said she's not scared of him anymore. She said what bothers her now is that he was so upset and he was trying so hard to tell her something, and she was 4 years old and she couldn't understand a word of it. She said she thinks about the fact that his son had that room. And she said, and she was laughing when she said it, that uncomfortable laugh people do. That she's never been able to shake the idea that he wasn't yelling at a stranger in his boy's bedroom. He was yelling at somebody he thought had come back.